Hey, what's up, people? Welcome to my review and in-depth analysis of the Star Wars novel known as Children of the Jedi, written by Barbara Hambly and part of the Callista trilogy. And now that I finished reading this book, I just want to say I should have listened to all the negative reviewers that have been spewing nothing but negative criticism towards this book for decades, because man, were they right. This book is just terribly written to the point of it just being just incomprehensible at times. And not only that, but it's just a bore and a chore to read. Why didn't I listen to all the negative reviewers in regards to this book? It's because, the plot outline for this book, if you read the plot outline on the back of the book or in the inner jacket, it comes across as very interesting. This is basically a book that was written before the prequel trilogy. And as a result of that, it basically paints an image of the Jedi that I find more preferable than what we got in the prequel trilogy. However, the execution is just terrible. What am I referring to? I'm referring to basically the Jedi prior to the prequels being released. And according to these authors and the Bantam era Star Wars novels, the Jedi were allowed to have families. They were allowed to have children. They were allowed to get married. And basically, the basic plot for this book is that the Jedi, there's a secret, right? And our heroes have to discover this secret as to what happened to the children of the Jedi. What happened to these families that just mysteriously disappeared, and it's tied to this doomsday machine, another doomsday machine from Palpatine. And the doomsday machine in this one is called the Eye of Palpatine, right? And for me, that sounds very fascinating. Like, oh, I want to know more. I want to know more about how the prequel era was initially before the prequels came out. I want to know more about that because I love this whole idea of the Jedi being allowed to have families and not being like the Jedi were depicted in the prequels, which was super orthodox and overly dogmatic and basically just they sucked. For the most part, because they were completely emotionless. They were like Vulcans, right? So this whole idea of getting a glimpse of how the prequel Jedi were supposed to be before the actual movies came out, according to the Bantam era authors, sounds very interesting. Even if they're not really in the book, even if it's just told through hearsay from the characters or history. I just wanted a glimpse of that. I love that stuff. And you get glimpses of that in the Bantam era Star Wars, for the Bantam era books, before the prequels were released, before Del Rey took over, right, as publisher for the Star Wars novels. You got glimpses of how the prequel era was like before the movies came out and changed it. And I respect that because George Lucas, he's the creator of Star Wars. It's his story. So I'm not disappointed because his movies didn't follow what was laid down in the novels, right? But at the same time, I think some of those ideas in the novels were better than the ones he executed in the prequel movies. So that being said, getting a glimpse of that is interesting. And this was done in the Thrawn trilogy. In the Thrawn trilogy, the Clone Wars are described as having the clones fight against the Jedi. Whereas in the cartoon and in the movies, the clones fight alongside the Jedi and then betray them. So those little things are interesting to me. And I thought reading this book and getting a glimpse of how a different version of how the Jedi were depicted other than the prequels, them being allowed to have families and children, I thought that would be interesting, but boy was I wrong. Man, this book is just awful. The worst thing about the author's writing is just that initially at first she's very descriptive, right? And, I like that. I like world building. I'm a big fan of J.R. Tolkien, who is all about world building. And initially for the beginning of this book, like maybe the first 40, 50 pages, I think she does a good job. The author spends a significant amount of time describing the world, describing in deep detail the world, the environment, the cultures of the people, the different species of aliens, how they look and stuff like that. And immediately I was like, okay, this is very different than your typical Star Wars novel. Sure, all these authors from the Star Wars novels, they describe things, but not like this woman. She does it in really, really deep detail. But hey, it didn't turn me off, right, at first. But then we get into the later aspects of the book, and it's just like, oh my God, it just drags on and drags on. And the worst thing, I guess you want to say, plot point of this book is just this segment, right, where Luke, he's stuck in a place where there's all these different aliens that think they're stormtroopers. It's like they've been brainwashed or mind controlled to think that they're stormtroopers. So you got Jawas that think they're stormtroopers and Gamorreans that think they're stormtroopers and all these different aliens, and it just goes on and on and on. And it's just ridiculous, and sometimes it's incomprehensible as to what's going on, because it's like she goes into such detail with this stuff that you just find yourself asking, what's the point of this and why should I care? I'm talking about like 20, 30 pages of like Gamorreans arguing with Jawas about their duties as stormtroopers and who's loyal and disloyal and infighting and arguing. And it's just like, look, I know this is all mind control nonsense. Why are we spending so much time on this? And it just goes on, and I just find myself reading it, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I don't care. This has nothing to do with the missing children of the Jedi. This has nothing to do with the Eye of Palpatine, but it just goes on and on and on and on, and it comes across as incomprehensible because these characters are brainwashed, or their mind is being controlled, and it's just absurd. It's absurd to think of a little Jawa that thinks it's a stormtrooper and a Gamorrean, which are basically those hog-looking aliens from Return of the Jedi that think they're stormtroopers, and they're barking orders at Luke like, "What are you doing, soldier?" and all this stuff. And I'm just like, oh my God. Like, if you just take what you're reading and paint a mental portrait, which is the point of reading in the first place, the scenario that's being painted is just absurd and stupid. If you were to try to direct a movie based on what's written in this book, in this particular nonsensical scene that just keeps going on and on and on, it would be like one of the worst Star Wars sequences ever put to film. Worse than Jar Jar Binks being silly. Right? It's just so dumb. And the book is just boring because it just goes on and on and on. And I thought the whole point was to find out what happened to the children of the Jedi. But it's like this book lacks focus, right? So there's two different stories going on, right? You got Han, Leia looking for the children of the Jedi, and then you got Luke that's basically stuck with the whole Eye of Palpatine, Callista, and he's around these aliens that think they're stormtroopers loyal to the Emperor thing. And it's just like, oh my God, man. And the whole like, where are the missing children of the Jedi? It's just like, it just feels like it, even though the name of the book is called Children of the Jedi, it feels like that plot takes a back seat to this stupid, like Luke is surrounded by a bunch of aliens that think they're loyal to the Emperor. They think that they're Imperial troopers, and he's stuck with this program that turns out to be Callista, a former Jedi, controlling the Eye of Palpatine. And it's just like, man, yeah, this book sucks. It's awful. One of the worst Star Wars books ever written. I should have listened to all the negative reviews. I really, really, really wasted my time reading this trash. And no, I will not be reviewing the other two books in this trilogy because, yeah, there's better Star Wars material to read than this trash. So This book begins on the planet Ethorian. And again, the beginning of this book really grabbed my attention. I was like, okay, this stuff's interesting. This is a very interesting introduction. It pulls me in, but man, the book loses focus. So the book starts out on the planet Ethorian, and you got this character named Drub McCum. Which is like, it's such a bad name. So Drub McCum attacks Han Solo, yelling, "Solo! Kill you all! Pletwell! Children gathering! Stop them! Children of the Jedi! Hide the children in the well!" So basically Han Solo is attacked by this dude that's just spewing out this nonsense, and it's causing confusion and alarm and all this stuff, right? And then you have these other two characters named Nikos and Cray, which are students of Luke Skywalker. So Luke has his Jedi Academy up and running, and Nikos and Cray are going to play an important role in this terrible story. So basically, Nikos has memories of the lost children of the Jedi, right? So he was present at some point, and our characters are trying to find out what the hell was this attack about. Like, what the hell was it about? What was he yelling about, this Drub McCum character? And basically, they're trying to put two and two together, find out what this Pletwell thing is. And Nikos thinks what he's trying to refer to is a place called Pletwell or Plawwall. So they're trying to basically conclude what he's meaning, what this guy's screaming about, right? And Nikos is trying to put two and two together. Is he referring to Pletwell, which is where I have memories of the children of the Jedi? So one important aspect of this Nikos character is that he's kind of like a cyborg now, right? He's not fully organic. And, and that's actually kind of interesting. That's kind of interesting, right? Because you don't really come across cyborg stuff in Star Wars if you really think about it. And while I was reading this, it really reminded me of the Dune series, right? Because you get that in Dune. You get that with, what's his name? Idaho's character from Dune. Okay, so this kind of reminded me of that. And Luke decides to read Nikos' mind in order to, find out what all this stuff is about. Is it Pletwell? Is it Plawwall? What's going on? Why did they attack Han? What's this got to do with children of the Jedi? And Luke is particularly interested because you got to remember, he's starting up the new Jedi Academy. So he's trying to find out as much about the Jedi as possible. Right? And really, it's a really interesting question. What happened to the children of the Jedi? So basically, Nikos thinks that it's on the planet Belsavis, whatever, right? And then Luke, when he was reading Nikos' mind, he sensed darkness, an evil consciousness present. Not necessarily of Nikos' mind, but maybe something else, right? And to me, if you read the back flap of the inner flap of the dust jacket or the back of the book, you kind of already presume that this dark consciousness is Palpatine, right? All right. So it's not really that mysterious. So Nikos had a degenerative disease, right? And that's why he's a cyborg now. And Nikos gives the coordinates to the Moonflower Nebula through meditation with Luke. So Luke kind of probes deeper as to what's going on with this dark consciousness that he sensed in Nikos. And basically, he gets these coordinates to a place called the Moonflower Nebula. And Nikos and Cray and Luke go to the Moonflower Nebula in order to see what that's about. So, even as I read this, it's kind of ridiculous that this whole Children of the Jedi aspect of the story is left to Han and Leia and not Luke. You would think that Luke would be more interested in the Children of the Jedi than some obscure place. I don't know. Just reading that, I just feel like Luke would be more interested in the Jedi thing, but That's the way this book is written. And honestly, up to this point, the story was interesting, right? But the very second our characters, our three main protagonists, Han, Luke, and Leia, break apart and go on separate journeys, that's when the beginning of this book, that's when this book starts to see the problems. It starts to begin right here, right? So again, Nickos, Cray, and Luke go to the Moonflower Nebula, whereas Leia and Han are going to try to find out what's this whole Children of the Jedi thing, right? And when Nickos, Cray, and Luke go to the Moonflower Nebula, they're attacked. And during this attack, Luke suffers a concussion, and he meets these abandoned stormtroopers, right? And he meets these Gamorreans, these aliens, and basically they attack him. They think that they're loyal to the Emperor. They think that they're Imperials. And not only that, but the Eye of Palpatine also attacks. And then we cut back to Leia and Han, who go to Belsavis in order to meet this character named Jevax. And basically, this character shows them the Citadel of the Jedi. And he finds it difficult to remember any of the details in regards to the Jedi, the families, the children. And basically, he feels like the Jedi blotted out a lot of the people's minds there, right? And basically, the reason why Han and Leia go to Belsavis in the first place is because of that whole Plowell thing that character Drub McCum was hollering about when he attacked Han at the very beginning of the book. So Han and Leia see this Jedi Master's work, right? And the Jedi Masters, I think the guy's name, I may not be 100% accurate with my pronunciation, but I think his name is Plet. And then it turns into this whole clue. Instead of being Plowall, it's Plet's Well, right? So Jedi Master Plet's work, and basically his ruins, basically it's basically Plet's Citadel, right? And they think it's also Plet's Well. So Han and Leia are trying to basically unravel this mystery, and there's these crypts and hot springs, and maybe these hot springs are what this Drub McCum character was referring to when he said Plet's Well. And they're basically given a tour of the crypts by this Jevax character, and and there's just kind of this inference as to whether whatever this guy's talking about or whatever he believes were they implanted in him by the Jedi. And the Han and Leia aspect of this story, them trying to find out what's going on with the Children of the Jedi, what happened to them, is way more interesting than this whole nonsense with Luke and the Eye of Palpatine. But like I said in the introduction, it gets overlooked by the whole crap involving Luke and the Eye of Palpatine. So there's a question that Leia and Han they basically ask themselves, and it's, if the Emperor knew about this place, why didn't they destroy it? Why didn't the Empire destroy this place? Just why is this crypt been abandoned? So more questions, right? And then we kind of find out that Nickos and Cray's mother was part of this colony. She was part of the Children of the Jedi. And it's also interesting to note that corporations have taken over this area where these crypts are and things like that. And Leia, she can sense the children, and she could sense their memories. And while Leia and Han are undergoing this search or trying to unravel this mystery, Luke still trying to overcome his concussion, and he's feeling confused, and he's having like false memories. And this is where the book takes a complete plunge and just never comes back from the oblivion of absurdity and just complete and utter trash. So Luke wakes up out of his concussion, and he's having these false memories, and it's just a bunch of jarbled nonsense, and it goes on and on and on for pages. And as I read it, I'm just like, what the hell is the point of all this? Like, I don't understand. Is the author trying to create some kind of like atmosphere here? Because it's not working. Instead, it's just coming across as just a bunch of incomprehensible trash. I feel like the author was intending to create this atmosphere of like danger or confusion, and for me to empathize with Luke's confusion, but she fails miserably because I don't feel any sense of danger here. There's no mystery here. It's just a bunch of garbage. It's just a bunch of ridiculousness. So Luke is confused, and then we find out that it was indeed the Eye of Palpatine that attacked his ship, and that Krey and the Gamorreans think that they're stormtroopers. So now Krey also thinks she's a stormtrooper, and they fight amongst themselves because a bunch of these brainwashed aliens think that there's mutineers amongst them, and the Gamorreans fight with the Jawas, and it just goes on and on and on. And as I read it, I'm just like screaming to the ceiling, what the fuck is going on? And I kid you not, it's like 20, 30 pages of nonsense. So we find out that they are indeed on the Eye of Palpatine, and that this thing called the Will controls everything. So the Will comes across like this computer program or software, but with this like spiritual component, the spiritual consciousness to it. And the Will controls everything, right? It's also at this point in the story that we find out that 30 years ago, the Eye of Palpatine was on a Belsavis mission. Now, Belsavis, remember, that's where Han and Leia are currently. And that this mission was a secret from the Jedi, but that someone found out, and this someone, their Y-Wing was shot down by an auto defense system, right? And this disabled the Eye of Palpatine's triggering mechanism and signal relay stations in order to disable this mission, right? Now, Luke, at this point in the story, is given a lightsaber by a Jawa. And it's inferred, unless you don't know what's going on, that this lightsaber belonged to this Callista character. And again, I'm not impressed. So Han and Chewie, going back with Han and Leia and Chewie, Han and Chewie get chased out of the crypts by crazy lunatic smugglers, similar to that Drub McCum character who attacked Han at the beginning of the book. So with this, we can find out that, okay, so this Drub McCum character, he didn't just go crazy by himself. There's something going on here that made all these smugglers go crazy, right? And then we jump back with Luke and Krey, right? She's been accused of being a rebel and a mutineer by the Will. And Luke kind of, at this point, sees a mirage, right, of a woman's face. Again, unless you have no inference, or unless you lack a total capacity for inference or comprehending inference, you totally know that this mirage of this woman is Callista, who is now the Will, right? And also, at this point of the story, Mara Jade tells Han and Leia about a character named Oron Keldor, who designed a super ship for the Emperor with the intention to destroy Jedi families. Now, how does Mara know about this? Well, you got to remember, she used to work for the Empire. She used to be the Emperor's hand. So she has knowledge to all the secrets, right? So that's why she was able to have that knowledge, and she provides that knowledge to Han and Leia. But as far as what happened to the Eye of Palpatine, she doesn't know. Now, at this point in the story, Han shows Mara a piece of rock ivory that was salvaged from anti-gravity wells. And from this, they are able to conclude somehow that Drub McCum ran the corridor, which is like a smuggling spot on Belsavis. So Krey is something of a computer expert. And because of this, and because she's like a Jedi essentially, she's able to transfer Nico's memories into a droid one, right? Because Nikos is dying, he's losing his basically he's losing his humanity, right? And she's able to transfer his memories into a droid one. And as she does this, she expects him to be able to reacquire his use of the Force. Like, I don't know where this whole like machines can use the Force kind of thing came from, but I just never came across this in Star Wars before. And I don't think this author has any idea what the hell she's doing. I really question if she's even seen a Star Wars movie or read a Star Wars book, because all this stuff comes across as nonsense. So ultimately, in the end, Cray sees Nikos beside her the entire time in her captivity. But she can't do anything about it because of a restraining bolt. And ultimately, she comes to the conclusion that Nikos is no longer human. And Nikos feels the same way. And he stays with Cray in order to destroy the Eye of Palpatine. And that's basically what happens. And again, all this stuff as to how they're able to do these things is not explained. I don't know why she thought that if she transferred Nikos' consciousness into a droid, why he would still be able to use the Force. I mean, man, honestly, it just comes across as a bunch of nonsense. It's ridiculous. Now, another important detail in this book that has to be noted is that the designers of the Death Star start to mysteriously disappear and end up dead, right? Now, it's kind of interesting to see Leia come to terms with this, because you would think that she has no sympathy for these people whatsoever because of what happened to her home planet Alderaan, right? And initially she doesn't. But there's this scene where she reads this apology from one of the designers of the Death Star, and seeing her kind of deal with that was interesting. And yes, I am finding like a tiny little positive thing in this book, but it is nowhere near good enough to save this pathetic and worthless story. But I just wanted to put that in there because it was interesting, right? Now, in regards to the villain, so who's the one behind all this crap that's going on, right? So it's not the Will. So the villain ultimately is a character named Irek, right? And he has this brain implant that allows him to use his own Force sensitivity in order to influence machines, right? Now, I never heard of this in the Star Wars universe up until now, right? And here we are again with the Force being able to control machines. And I'm just like, maybe it could be an interesting idea if it was explored better in another book or something, another property. But this shit is just stupid, right? So this character, Irek, he has the ability to influence machines, right? Mechanicals, whatever, right? And he's causing all sorts of droid malfunctions. And he even tries to get R2-D2 to kill Han and Leia while they sleep, in what was probably one of the most ridiculous scenes ever, right? Now, just imagine R2-D2 trying to be threatening, right? Imagine R2-D2, a character who we've come to love and almost kind of feel like R2-D2 is kind of like cute or something, right? Well, R2-D2 tries to kill Leia, right? And the author tries to make it seem credible. But the whole time I was reading it, I'm like, this is so stupid. Like, this is so dumb. Like, am I really supposed to take R2-D2 as a serious threat? Like, oh no, R2 almost killed Leia. Watch out, Leia. Like, the whole time I was reading it, I just wanted to throw this book into the garbage. So yeah, the reason why that happened is because of this Irek character, right? And this Irek character thinks he can control the Eye of Palpatine when it arrives, right, to on Belsavis. And this ends up being his undoing, because ultimately what happens is the Jawas, who were initially brainwashed to be stormtroopers on the Eye of Palpatine, they're able to snap out of their brainwashing, right? And they cause damage to the wiring of the Eye of Palpatine, and Iraq is not able to control anything when the Eye of Palpatine comes. And I guess that's supposed to be the big moment where we see that the villain has failed in his plot. But it's stupid, man. It wasn't impressive. I didn't find it interesting, and ultimately I hated it. I mean, I got one little good thing to say. Leia, she's able to retrieve a lot of interesting Jedi relics, or interesting Jedi weaponry, if you want to call it that, from the old fortress. And the interesting thing is, none of this stuff is ever seen again in the history of Star Wars. So it just kind of makes you ask what the point of all that was. But Irek ultimately disappears in the confusion of not being able to control the Eye of Palpatine. And there's this interesting chase and fight between Leia and Irek, which totally overshadows all the crap and nonsense going on with Luke. As I've stated, the Leia portion of this book is way better than the Luke Skywalker stuff, right? And I did fail to mention that Luke Skywalker, he passes out 5 times in this book. I mean, he comes across as inept and incompetent. But anyway, back to Leia. There's an interesting chase and fight between Leia and Irek. And it was exciting, but ultimately, I just feel super disappointed because nothing comes out of the whole search for the Jedi children. All we get is this dumb, romantic infatuation from Luke for Callista. And the thing that's most maddening about this book, besides the nonsensical plot point with the aliens that think they're stormtroopers and the whole Callista thing, it's just that this whole investigation for the lost children of the Jedi amounts to nothing. It goes nowhere. You learn nothing new about this. The only thing that this book brings as far as the children of the Jedi is the mystery itself. So there's no resolution, there's no discovery of any new material. It amounts to nothing. And so the big sense of urgency that's generated in regards to this book is that Luke finds out that basically the Eye of Palpatine is going to go to Belsavis in order to destroy that planet, which it originally was programmed to do 30 years ago. So Luke is like, oh no, I gotta save my friends. I gotta save Han and Leia and all this stuff. And basically Callista was the Jedi that initially stopped the Eye of Palpatine's mission 30 years prior. And when she did that, she sacrificed her life, right? So basically, it turns out that Luke and Callista, they fall in love. And it's so weird. And I avoid using the word abstract, because for me, when you say abstract, it just means, to me, something that's abstract, it's a good thing. But this is not good abstract. This is just stupid, in other words. So basically what happens is this. Even though Callista sacrificed her life to save Belsavis from the original mission from the Eye of Palpatine to destroy that planet, her spirit still exists. And it's a fading spirit that exists in the gunnery computers. How is she able to do this? It's not explained, right? So first there's that. And basically this tenderness, this relationship grows between Luke and Callista, and it's so forced. It's so random. And it's even inferred that there's some kind of sexual union between Luke and Callista on the spiritual astral plane. and it's just like, what the hell is going on? So as the tenderness between Luke and Callista grows, they basically work together in order to disable the Eye of Palpatine all over again, right? And again, it's stupid, it's ridiculous, and it's just hard not to laugh while I do this review. So one thing happens is that Nikos, the character Nikos, dies, right? And as a result of him dying, Cray just feels like she wants to be united with Nikos, right? And as a result of this, she doesn't want to live anymore. So here you have this Jedi, Cray, who doesn't want to live anymore. And Callista, the spirit of Callista, accommodates her by basically taking over her body so that she could, I guess, be materialized in order to be with Luke, And, one thing that was really, really just hair-pulling is that Luke calls Callista baby. I'm just like, oh, man. Wow. This author really does not know how to write Star Wars, right? So that's what happens. Callista takes over Cray's body because she doesn't want to live anymore. And to me, that's so anti-Jedi. For a Jedi not want to live anymore. I don't want to live anymore because my lover or Nikos is dead or whatever. It's just like, look, man, Jedi don't look at death as some kind of desperate, miserable thing. Right? Nikos has become one with the Force. And for me, Cray should be at peace with that. Instead of being like, I want to die, kill me so I could be with him. It's like, oh man, this author does not know what Star Wars is about. She has no business writing Star Wars. And this right here, for me, was just really upsetting because it's just stupid and it's just not like Star Wars at all. So that's what happens. Callista basically take over Cray's body. Cray doesn't want to live anymore, so she dies. And another stupid thing is that when Callista takes over Cray's body, she's able to change the Cray's eye color. Why? I don't know, man. But when you really think about it, really sit back and think about this. Luke essentially falls in love with a spirit. He automatically has this connection, this romantic thing between a spirit, right? And then this spirit takes over the body of his student. And it's like, okay, if anybody can't see how stupid, ridiculous, and just really disturbing that thought is, I don't know what to tell you. That is just stupid. It's just really weird. And not in an abstract way. This is just like off-putting. This is the worst Star Wars book ever. I should have listened to the negative reviews. It is truly bad. It's so bad that every other book that I gave an F2 before this, bump it up one letter grade. That's how bad this book is. So, because of the union between Luke and Callista, they are able to stop the Eye of Palpatine. She is now in this body of his former student, Cray, and it's inferred that they're going to start this big romantic thing. However, it's not a big happy ending because Callista doesn't have Jedi powers and she's sad and Luke comforts her. And yeah, and basically that's just the end of this waste of time. Please don't read this book. I wish I never read it. It took up a lot of my time. I'm sad that I'll never get that time back. I literally wasted a good 3 weeks trying to read this worthless piece of crap. I'd rather read the ingredients to a 409 bottle than this. It's that bad. So do I even have to say this book is an F minus? So thank you guys for listening to this review and in-depth analysis. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share. May the force be with you. And last but not least, one love, people. Take care.